He emerged from the downpour, favoring a leg. Covered in mud, with bleeding wounds, he moved in silence. He wore no collar, no lead, only a pair of injured paws and a gaze that remained fixed, as if pursuing an unseen quarry. He traversed interstates, waterways, and woodlands, enduring discomfort as if it were inconsequential. Because, for him, the crucial thing was locating a specific individual, the sole person who had ever shown him benevolence. And for that objective, this German shepherd journeyed more than 300 miles, injured, famished, and unwilling to surrender. Yet, the instant their eyes met once more, the situation transformed entirely. This is not merely a narrative of endurance. It concerns a profound affection that resists being consigned to oblivion. It was shortly after 5 p.m. The heavens unleashed a deluge over a segment of roadway near Asheville, North Carolina. Thunder resounded like a battle signal, and rain fell with such intensity that it obscured vehicle windshields. While most individuals were hurrying homeward, one lorry driver applied his brakes abruptly. He had observed something faltering along the edge of the thoroughfare. Initially, he suspected it was refuse, perhaps an injured deer. But as his vehicle's lights focused, the figure became clear. A German shepherd, drenched, trembling, and painfully pulling an injured paw over the sharp asphalt. His ribs were visible beneath his tangled coat. His head was bowed, and each movement appeared to be an immense effort. Yet he persisted, one step followed by another. Not rapidly, but with a determination that was palpable. Reports were made. Residents discussed the sighting. A handful of people pulled over, proffering sustenance and drink. Some even attempted to contact animal welfare services. However, the canine showed no interest in assistance. Each attempt to get near caused him to withdraw just far enough to maintain a gap, yet not so far as to deviate from his course. It was as if he possessed a clear destination and was uninterested in anything that diverted from it. No vocalizations, no snarls, just a soundless progression through an ordeal. Enter Erica, a veterinary assistant from a nearby animal refuge. She picked up on the radio discussions, set aside the pile of neglected documents on her workstation, and drove directly into the tempest. By the time she neared his position, the dog was a half-mile further on. He moved as if the discomfort was no longer a sensation he registered, as if he had conditioned himself to ignore it. A trail of blood marked his path. Smears on the damp road, absorbed by the gravel, imprinted onto the earth. Erica trailed him with caution and in quiet, maintaining a distance of at least 50 feet. Each time she endeavored to approach, he would stop just long enough to convey a warning without aggression, then resume his journey. As evening approached, the dog turned off the main road and entered the wooded area, limping along the margin of a public path just past the Blue Ridge Parkway. The precipitation subsided, but the chill intensified. Erica parked her vehicle some way off, placed food out, and waited. He did not consume it. He simply settled beneath a shrub, his ears alert, eyes partially closed, yet he did not truly slumber. Even in his depleted state, he kept his nose oriented northward, as if celestial bodies had charted his route and surrender was not an option. She called him dog, not from a want of imagination, but because names suggest possession. This animal had no leash, no identification, no history that anyone could assert. He was a specter, leaving a trail of blood across different counties, and the reason remained unknown. Yet, Erica perceived one certainty. This was no ordinary stray. Within those weary eyes lay a narrative, a recollection, a purpose, a final point. Something was impelling him forward with greater force than either starvation or injury could restrain him. By the next day, he had departed once more. The provisions remained untouched. The sanguine trail was somewhat more indistinct, yet still discernible. Erica persisted in her pursuit, not to apprehend, not to claim, but to observe. Because somewhere in the distance, Dog was pursuing an objective more significant than mere continued existence. And she could not turn away. Not at this juncture. And as she traversed the incline behind him just past the watercourse, she witnessed something that made her stop abruptly. Dog had halted for the initial time, not to recuperate but to gaze at an old gravel track branching off to the west. The manner in which his frame tensed, as if an unseen cord had been drawn taut, caused her to hold her breath. That track held significance for him. She was not yet aware of its meaning, but he was. The gravel path where Dog halted was not indicated on any satellite navigation system. There were no markers, no residences in the vicinity, merely an expanse of fractured rock bordered by rustling pine trees, disappearing into the contours of the Blue Ridge. He showed no reluctance. He limped away from the main walkway and into the quietude, leaving Erica behind yet again. She refrained from calling to him. She understood by this point that it would be futile. Instead, she trailed at a considerate interval, murmuring observations into her phone's recording feature, her digits quivering from the cold, and another sensation, the conviction that she was observing more than an animal adrift. She was monitoring a mission. Back at the animal shelter, Erica's associates held differing opinions. Some respected her tenacity. Others advised her to desist. However, when she provided a thorough account of the dog, his gait, his demeanor, his refusal to allow anyone near, one of the supervisors became quiet on the telephone. Then, following a lengthy intermission, she remarked, "That resembles the shepherd we lost. You must exercise caution." As per the documentation, a male German shepherd had been admitted 6 weeks prior by a local road maintenance team. He had been discovered unconscious near a stream, with injuries that were not entirely consistent. There were fractures, burns, and scars, not all of which were recent. The dog remained silent, never barked, and did not react to displays of affection or instructions. Even following surgical intervention, he declined nourishment for several days. Then, without a sound, he disappeared. He had gnawed through a section of a metal enclosure, not in a fit of rage, but with deliberate effort. No agitation, merely resolve. Personnel reviewed surveillance footage. He waited until the corridors were deserted, forced his way through a secondary entrance, and vanished. He had not been sighted since. Until this moment. Erica froze as she absorbed the information. The supervisor's concluding words were more cutting than the wind. That dog wasn't merely frightened. He had endured something. I don't know what, but he was constantly observing the entrance. The atmosphere surrounding the narrative abruptly shifted. This was no longer merely an extended journey. It was an escape, and not solely from a location, but from whatever had rendered him so desolate internally. As Erica ventured further into the woods that evening, she discovered an open space where Dog had paused to rest. The ground was unsettled where he had circled thrice before succumbing to exhaustion, as if inherent behavior still governed his need for comfort even if his body could not attain it. Nearby, she observed something that caused a pang in her chest, an aged flannel cloth partly concealed beneath fallen leaves, worn and frayed at its periphery as if it had been transported for many miles. Dog had positioned it between his paws with a gentleness befitting a sacred object. And then, just as twilight approached, a group of adolescents passed by on the ridge trail on bicycles. They were boisterous, inconsiderate, discarding beverage containers, and their laughter carried on the wind. One container landed excessively close. The sound was sharp. Dog sprang to his feet, teeth exposed, not towards the youths, but towards the empty air. His muscles tensed. His respiration accelerated. For a brief instant, he appeared poised to disappear once more. Yet, he did not flee. He stood there, quivering, his eyes surveying the trees. Erica murmured to herself, "What did they inflict upon you?" She observed from a distance as Dog slowly reclined again. The wind intensified. The bottle rolled, unheeded, and as the sky transitioned to a violet hue and the trees swayed above him, Dog did something she had not previously witnessed. He inclined his head towards the mountains and emitted a solitary, low whimper, not of fear, not of pain, but of recollection. That evening, Erica sat in her vehicle, jotting down observations. And for the initial time, she appended a new entry: "He is not merely walking, he is returning." But to what or to whom? I still do not know. And somewhere just around the next curve in the path, Dog was already in motion once more. Not without direction, not disoriented, merely resolute. Bleeding, certainly, limping, invariably, yet advancing as if hope possessed a scent, and he would not cease until he located it. On the periphery of Cherokee National Forest, nestled between two ascending slopes and partly obscured by trees more ancient than the nearby settlement itself, stood a modest cabin that had not received callers for months. It was not derelict, merely isolated, much like the individual who resided within it. Justin, aged 39, was not the sort of person easily overlooked, but he ensured he remained inaccessible. Formerly an emergency medical technician in Knoxville, he was now a wood craftsman who preferred solitude. He had exchanged the wail of sirens for the sound of woodworking and city illuminations for the glow of lanterns. The local inhabitants knew him more by his standing than by personal acquaintance. He possessed one of those countenances, weather-beaten, contemplative, with a mark just above his eyebrow that prompted curiosity but deterred inquiry. He operated a small enterprise selling handcrafted benches and tables. No one was aware of his timber sources or the reason he never made deliveries personally. He would visit the town bi-monthly, communicate only when addressed, and depart before a subsequent question could be posed. However, this particular week, a change had occurred. Minor, subtle occurrences such as the faint sound of twigs rustling when he was not outdoors or a patch of bloody paw imprints that materialized one morning near his rear gate. He observed scratches on the bark of a maple tree, a few bones strewn near the woodpile, meticulously cleaned and arranged, not the disordered remnants of a scavenger, but something disconcertingly deliberate. And then there were the nights. The wind possessed its own cadence here, a melody of rustling foliage and distant owls. But recently an irregular element had joined the symphony, a slight shuffling sound near the veranda, a protracted exhalation behind the screen door, a quietness that felt observed. He disclosed this to no one. Justin was not given to undue suspicion. He had encountered more severe situations. He simply resumed securing the entrances. That morning he went outside at an early hour. The sky was still muted with the morning mist. He stepped onto the veranda holding a cup of black coffee and stopped abruptly. Lying at the foot of the steps as if deposited there by destiny or something that retained memory was Dog. His fur was drenched, matted with dried blood and mud. His right paw was distended, unnaturally contorted, yet he made no sound. His chest moved with slow, labored respirations. He did not bark, did not stir, merely lifted his head fractionally and met Justin's gaze. And in that instant, something within Justin fractured, not with alarm, but with acknowledgement. The scar above Dog's left eyebrow. The sutured injury on his side, scarcely discernible beneath the grime. Justin let the mug fall. It broke upon the veranda, but he showed no reaction. His hand moved to his side, to a spot where instinct recalled a trauma he had not mentioned for months. This was not an unfamiliar animal. This was the very same dog. The one he had discovered along a riverbank during a camping excursion. The one with a collapsed lung, numerous fractures, partially drowned and too feeble to stand. Justin had transported him for 2 miles, tended to his injuries in his cabin, remained awake for 3 consecutive nights, nursing him back to awareness. He had given him no name, said nothing, merely provided nourishment, cleaned him, and waited. Then, one day, the dog had vanished. No sound, no forewarning, simply gone. And now he had returned, having emerged from some unknown tempest, bleeding and injured once more. And somehow he had navigated his way here, through mountains, forests, miles of roadway, all the way back to a man who believed he had let him down. Justin descended the steps unhurriedly, his heart caught somewhere between incredulity and remorse. He knelt beside Dog and murmured, "You recall me, don't you?" Dog blinked. Not a recoil, not a snarl, just a tranquil, battered sort of serenity. And Justin, who had not made physical contact with another living being for months, did something unexpected. He extended his hand and Dog permitted it. The entrance creaked as Justin transported Dog into the cabin, not held delicately like a delicate object, but lifted with the solicitude of someone clinging to something already partially gone. The interior of the cabin was redolent of cedar and firewood, silent save for the gentle rhythm of rain against the roof. Justin placed Dog on an aged flannel covering near the hearth, the same covering he utilized during winter tempests to warm himself when the power unit malfunctioned. He knelt beside him without uttering a sound, merely observing his chest rise and fall, slow, irregular. Dog's paw was in a dire state, torn open along the pads and inflamed, judging by the distension. Justin fetched his old medical supplies, acting more on ingrained response than conscious deliberation, and commenced cleansing the wound. Dog winced but did not bite. He did not withdraw. He observed Justin as one might watch the final glimmer of light at the distant end of a passage, uncertain of its reality. Justin murmured, "It's all right." As he applied the bandage, his digits trembled, not from alarm, but from the surge of emotions, the months of quietude, the culpability for not locating the dog sooner, the sheer disbelief that he had returned at all. That evening, Justin did not occupy his bed. He unfurled a sleeping bag adjacent to the fire and remained by Dog's side. Neither of them communicated, not that they were able, but the quietness was laden. Not void, not remote, simply full, the sort of quietness that exists only between two entities who have encountered suffering, endured it, and continued onward. By the morning, the rain had ceased. Sunlight streamed in bands across the floorboards. Dog adjusted his position and, for the first time, emitted a low moan, a sound that was not quite pain, but something more profound. Justin sat up. "Are you still with me?" Dog did not reply, naturally, but he did something more telling. He turned his head and rested it on Justin's footwear. It was a minor action, a subtle one, yet it caused a shift within Justin, a sense of permission. He reached over, gently stroking the area behind Dog's ear. No flinching, no withdrawal, just warmth. He had not experienced that in a considerable time, the kind of warmth that did not originate from fire or fabric or heavy garments, but from connection. However, with connection comes recollection. Justin entered the rear chamber and came back with an old metallic container. Within it were fragments of a past he never discussed, photographs, insignia, notes hastily written on folded serviettes. At the very bottom lay an image, faded, creased, a solitary photograph of the cabin. And just in the periphery, near the veranda, sat Dog, injured, quiet, gazing at the camera with the same expression he had worn the previous day, as if he were never certain this moment would recur. Justin gazed at the photograph for a considerable duration. Then he looked at Dog, and all the questions that had plagued him for months surged back. Why had the dog departed? Where had he ventured? And, more significantly, from what had he been fleeing? There were no immediate solutions, only indications: the lacerated paw, the faraway look, the manner in which Dog refused to turn his back to the entrance. Even at that moment, that afternoon, as the woodland filled with the sound of distant avifauna and the cabin timbers groaned in the breeze. Dog rose slowly, arduously, but he did stand. Justin remained still. Dog proceeded, limping noticeably, a couple of paces to the main entrance and sat, not imploring to be let out, merely observing, guarding. And Justin, standing behind him, understood that whatever had afflicted Dog out there had not entirely defeated him. Something within him still held faith in this location, in this man, in this instant. And in some way, Justin shared that belief. For the ensuing few days, the cabin transformed into a tranquil realm of gentle movements, shallow respirations, and unvoiced comprehension. Justin spoke little and Dog communicated not at all. Yet their quietudes were no longer devoid of meaning. They were imbued with significance, with sorrow, with something elemental and delicate that neither was prepared to identify. Dog reposed by the entrance, invariably oriented outwards. He declined to use the bedding Justin provided or the fresh coverings arranged in the corner. He rested with one eye partially open, his muscles tensed as if anticipating a continued threat. Justin first observed it during the second night, the way Dog twitched with force in his slumber, limbs flailing, breath catching as if he were suffocating on a terrible dream. Justin sat upright, observing with a sense of powerlessness as Dog whimpered through tightened jaws, his body rigid and damp with perspiration. Then came the low, sorrowful growl, not directed at anything within the room but at something deeply concealed behind his eyes. Justin extended his hand unhurriedly, tenderly, and murmured, "You are secure now." Dog awakened with a sudden intake of breath, leaping to an upright position, paws scrabbling on the wooden flooring before collapsing back into a crouched posture, his heart beating rapidly. Yet, on this occasion, he did not flee. He did not expose his teeth. He merely looked at Justin as if he had momentarily forgotten his whereabouts. It was in that shattered gaze that Justin perceived the reflection of something he recognized, a suffering too profound for words to penetrate. That was not merely apprehension, it was trauma, a wound upon the spirit, the kind that no medication can mend. Justin remained largely silent that morning. However, instead of proceeding to his workshop as he typically did, he stayed indoors. He prepared a small amount of breakfast and set a bowl on the floor, then slid his own dish onto the floor as well and sat beside Dog. The action was not merely symbolic, it was genuine. Two beings side by side, consuming their meal as if they had nothing to validate, nothing to safeguard, and nothing further to elucidate. That afternoon, Justin attempted a different approach. He took an old leash, worn but sturdy, and opened the cabin door. "Let's give it a go," he said, more to himself than to the dog. He didn't fasten the leash, just held it in his hand as an offering. To his astonishment, Dog stepped outside first. They walked unhurriedly along the pine needle path that encircled the base of the mountain. Dog limped, head lowered, but he moved with a sense of direction as if even now, after all that had transpired, a destination was deeply ingrained within him. Yet something had altered. He repeatedly glanced over his shoulder, just enough to ensure Justin was still present. The woodland was quiescent, but Justin could not dispel the notion that Dog was not merely recuperating. He was in a state of anticipation, awaiting a sound, a shadow, a recollection to materialize from among the trees. Each snap of a branch caused his ears to twitch. Each gust of wind made him grow tense. And every time a bird flew too near, he would turn abruptly as if an internal part of him anticipated pain. Justin did not press. He did not inquire. But that evening, as they sat beside the fire, he spoke gently as if it might make a difference. I understand what it is like to bear something so profound you believe it controls you. Dog was silent. But you located me. You journeyed all this distance because you knew. Somewhere deep within, someone would recall. Dog did not raise his head, but his respiration grew more even. Justin leaned against the wall and shut his eyes. You are no longer solitary. And for the initial occasion, Dog sighed, not from discomfort, not from weariness, but from liberation. It was not yet complete reliance, not entirely. But it was a commencement. By the week's conclusion, Dog had gained strength. He still favored his leg and remained wary, but the vacant look in his eyes had diminished, replaced by something more acute, attentiveness. It was as if he were no longer merely subsisting, he was recollecting. Justin observed this transformation with a combination of wonder and disquiet. This dog had not returned seeking a renewed chance at solace, he had come back with unresolved matters. Consequently, Justin did what any individual with unanswered questions and a sense of unease would do. He picked up the telephone, not to contact a friend nor a veterinarian. He dialed the number of the shelter indicated on the identification tag he had once discovered entangled in Dog's rudimentary collar. He was uncertain if anyone would even respond, but someone did. Shelter 3 Pines. This is Erica. Her voice was clear, weary, and recognizable, the sort of tone one adopts after witnessing too much yet still endeavoring to care. Justin paused. I believe you have been tracking a dog. A moment of quietness on the other end of the line. Then, is he in your company? Yes, Justin affirmed, glancing towards Dog, who was asleep near the veranda. He located me. The telephone line fell silent for a brief instant, not a technical silence, but a human one. Then Erica exhaled. Where are you situated? 2 hours later, her vehicle made a crunching sound as it ascended the gravel path. She exited with unhurried, cautious movements, not from apprehension but from deference, the way an individual proceeds when aware they are about to encounter something venerable. Dog did not bark. He did not snarl. He simply stood observing her, his head inclined. When she uttered his name, if it could even be termed such, merely, "Hey, buddy," Dog did not recoil. He did not advance either. He simply acknowledged her presence. Erica knelt on the veranda steps and looked at Justin. You are the one. Justin crossed his arms. What does that signify? She sat beside him, not seeking consent. Following his escape from the shelter, he left traces of blood at every exit. But the notable thing is, he wasn't agitated. He didn't rush out as if he were feral. He waited. He observed. He chose his moment as if he had a specific destination. Justin stared at her. He journeyed here. 300 miles, she murmured. In that state, every individual who observed him reported the same, quiet, resolute, unyielding. Then she displayed something on her mobile device, a low-resolution surveillance image, a dim corridor, a hazy silhouette of a dog positioned at a metallic entrance, his head resting against it. Alone, waiting. Security footage from the shelter, she stated. That was the evening prior to his departure. He remained there in that manner for an hour. No barking, no pacing, just waiting. Justin was unable to speak. And then there is this. Erica navigated to a photograph on her phone, not of Dog, but of an injury record, diagrams, notations. Her voice lowered. He presented with injuries inconsistent with vehicular accidents or altercations with other strays. Puncture wounds in seemingly deliberate locations. Burns arranged in patterns. Contusions too severe for typical trauma. Justin's hands tightened on his knees. Erica did not meet his gaze as she said, we harbored a suspicion. One of our veterinarians remarked, dogs like him, sometimes they originate from clandestine fighting operations, experimental training facilities, unregulated, grim enterprises. Justin's voice was barely a whisper. You believe he was exploited? Eri,